meeting will come to order. Welcome, senators. I'm very pleased that you're here. Welcome, special guests and visitors. We're delighted that you're here with us today. Especially for those of you who are visitors new to the Senate, I just want to tell you a little bit about our procedures before we launch in. We have, the floor is created in this forum to enable discussion and debate and, of course, dissent. And so for that purpose, one of my main jobs is to keep order. So I would ask all of you who participate, in a minute I will be making a motion to the Senate to suspend our rules, which ordinarily permit only senators and members of the statutory faculty to speak during meetings. But I know that we have an item on the agenda today that is of great interest to many of you who are visitors here today. So I will ask the Senate to permit me to suspend the rules in order to acknowledge and have you participate in our discussion later on. When you do so, I'm going to ask that you come up to a microphone. If you are a visitor, we have a microphone for you here. Those of you who are senators, obviously, you can remain seated, and our wonderful Joey will run around with the mic for you. Especially in our motions today, because we have a lot of people who want to speak, I'm going to ask that you keep your remarks as brief as you can. I will probably allow everybody about 2 minutes. And just so you know, this body makes its decisions when it feels that it is informed enough to do so. And if it feels that at the end of the time that I allot for the discussion, it does not have enough information to make a decision, any member of this body can make a motion to postpone the discussion to a future time. So that's kind of a general sense of how we will run our business today. So before we begin and go into our first agenda item, which is approval of the minutes, I did want to make some remarks to my senators here, my colleagues on the Senate. I think most of you have been able to follow the email exchange that we've had in the last couple of days about Senator Harbaugh's motion having to do with ending subsidies to the athletic department. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to read them, I simply want to provide a very brief statement so that you understand my motivation is not to quash debate by any means, or discussion or dissent. That right belongs to you as the owners of this floor and as the principal organ of shared governance at the University of Oregon. We have the power to express our opinions and our recommendations, and we do so in resolutions. We also do so in legislation. And as I said in that email exchange, and I'll just repeat it here very quickly for those of you who haven't read it, my view is that our power in the legislative arena is narrower than it is in the resolution arena. But nevertheless, my responsibility is to do your will in terms of what you want on the agenda. And so, although I do set the agenda, of course this is a democratic body, and your majority vote to amend the agenda will carry the day. And I will facilitate that discussion with as much dedication as I would any other matter. So that is that. And then one more thing before we begin. I would like now to ask you for permission to suspend our rules so that during our discussion on motions today, I may acknowledge visitors who are not members of our Senate to participate. That's a matter that requires 2/3 of those voting to concur. So I would ask all those of you who will give me that permission to please raise your hands. And let's count them. Actually, you don't have to count them. I think we'll probably be close enough. And those who do not concur, please raise your hands. Okay, it's unanimous. All right, thank you very much for that. Good, so for our first official item on our agenda, we have approval of the minutes of our November 13th meeting of the Senate. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes? Sir. Oh, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second. Okay. All right, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hands. Opposed? All right, that motion carries and the minutes are approved. We have President Govertson with us today, and I invite you up to the podium, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Was that loud enough? Can we turn up the volume a little bit, please? Got it okay? Thanks very much. So thank you, President Paris. Pleased to be here today, and thank all of you for being here as well. I know it's an especially busy time. It's only been 3 weeks since we last met, so I'll keep these introductory remarks brief and concise, but I do want to comment on a number of significant matters before the Senate and update you on a few things that have been going on around the university. Last month, I noted that we had a very positive and productive meeting with the Senate Work Group on Academic Freedom and Freedom of Speech, and I'm pleased to report that our work on this important issue continues. We had another very good session just a couple of days ago, and I know that Professor Dreiling will provide a report for the committee this afternoon. I also spoke last month about our ongoing strategic planning process and how the broad participation of faculty and staff plays a very important role in shaping the plan as we move the university forward. So earlier this week, the provost sent out an invitation to our campus community to take part in a series of academic planning discussions that are scheduled over the next several months, beginning, I believe, next Tuesday. So your participation in these conversations, your colleagues, everyone, it's important, and they'll help determine the priorities that guide the direction of our university, and particularly our strategic capital campaign. These discussions are critical to our planning process. They're timely, relevant, and part of the larger effort to articulate a path forward for a university, a plan as we move forward. We are, as I've mentioned here, and you know, staging for a comprehensive strategic capital campaign. The academic planning process is critical to helping define that process. The deans are updating their plans for the strategic capital campaign as we speak, and so it's a very timely matter and really invite your participation. I think it's pretty clear in general with respect to our capital campaign what our needs are. Money, more money, additional funds, but to support in a planned way the advancement of the university and our mission. So more tenure-track faculty, improved facilities, more support for doctoral students, and we talk about that a lot, greater support for our graduate programs, and for our Oregon resident undergraduates. So I look forward to everyone's participation in that activity. The academic plan and the planning process we're engaged in really will help provide the foundation that informs this strategic capital campaign. It will help determine our priorities that we establish both in the near term and the long term. So helpful to have everyone's participation in that and appreciate it very much. Senator Paris, I'm going to cut short some other remarks, but really address an issue that I know is active in the Senate today, and that's comments on, I'll provide some comments on the athletic department funding issue. We've talked about that a couple of times, provided some remarks. I appreciate very much the Senate's concern, and I really appreciate our Senate President's determination that this is a matter worthy of discussion and to bring it forward in the proper venues. We have been involved in many discussions about this matter. I have over the last several months since the resolution was passed in the Senate. I've had a lot of discussions with the Vice President for Finance, the Athletic Director, some with the Senate President and others, and could provide some general remarks today, preliminary remarks really on my observations with respect to this critically important issue that confronts the university and budgeting issue. I'd start by reminding everybody and making clear my own observation. We have an athletics program that's amazing. It contributes to the strength of the university in many, many ways. There are, at the same time, very considerable revenues associated with the athletic program, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. And that's true here, as well as our colleague peer institutions, both in the Pac-12 and in the AAU, the public universities that we so critically benchmark with. There has been a a rapid increase and a continued increase in the revenues and expenditures associated with athletics, it raises a lot of issues for us, legitimate issues, and ones we want to very carefully consider and deliberate upon. We do know, I appreciate that successful athletics programs such as ours brings enormous value to the institution. It brings value in a lot of ways, in terms of recognition of the institution, commitment to excellence, student attention, attendance, great value in lots of ways. And so we value our association with our athletics program and the associations that it creates for us. For example, in the Pac-12, an association that rightly is concerned with athletic programs, but also academic components. And actually, we had a good interaction and visit with our Pac-12 colleagues just maybe a month or two ago as the governance leaders of the Pac-12 institutions assembled on our campus for consultations and conversations. So, very important set of associations that include both athletic and academic components. My observation is that in general, and just speaking at a pretty high order of abstraction for the moment, is that on a continuum of support, of general campus support, a continuum that would include our public AAU peers and our Pac-12 peers, our athletic department probably anchors the very low end of the range of general campus support. That is to say, there's less general campus support in general to our athletics department than is true for our peer institutions with whom our athletic department competes in many respects. The value to the campus, to our students, to our community, to the commitment for excellence in everything we do is very, very substantial, even as it's difficult to monetize. Let's truth be told, it's difficult to monetize every aspect of value for every program that we do, but it's important to try to do that as we seek to budget effectively, fairly, usefully the entire university. Because I would emphasize with you, to everyone, the truth, we are one university, a single entity. Our programs are interrelated as they should be. They center on our academic mission as they need to and should, and are interconnected in many levels, including budgetary levels. The fact of the matter is our budgets are very, very complex, as you well know, and have experienced in many ways. We don't have one budget. We have many budgets, many different sources of revenues, and they are very interrelated, and they're interrelated in a deliberate process, a process that this campus, in my estimation, has done exceedingly well. Prior to my arrival here, exceedingly well. A remarkable job of, and new job of animating a responsibility-centered budget, lots of good activity, and done that to a very high level, in my judgment, prior to my coming here. Just to reemphasize the values, our student athletes, contributors to this university, on and off the playing field, simply outstanding. Our coaches, our athletic administrators, outstanding jobs. So I think similar to many of our peers, and we do seek to make peer comparisons and benchmark in everything we do. This is no exception to that. So similar to to our peers, our athletics program is very successful. That's true generally in the Pac-12, our colleagues. It's done very well. And I would say, not the least of which, is that our athletic program, by and large, pays their own costs. And does that to an astonishingly high degree in comparison, by my estimation, to our peers. So that credits them very, very well. At the same time, the revenues are large, the costs are large, they've been increasing. There's a considerable national interest and local interest, should be, in how those revenues are generated and how they're expended, and their relationship to the academic programs. Absolutely legitimate, important things. to carefully analyze, to carefully study, to carefully budget, and to do that with the proper consultation. And that includes essential consultation with the faculty and with the Senate. So as I've reported to you, as we continue our discussion on this important issue, it is essential to do it, on the one hand, in the context of our existing agreements and obligations. I say existing agreements and obligations. There are many of them. They're posted on the athletic department website that have existed prior to my arrival here. And it's my belief, it's my view, that it's fair and it's appropriate and it's necessary that our athletic department be allowed to rely on those agreements as they budget and move forward. That's a budgetary principle that I think is a very, very important and critical for us to continue to adhere to. So I look at these issues in the context of what has happened in the past, the budgeting that has been done, and the very important set of obligations and agreements that exist between the campus and the athletic department that determine, in many respects, what their financial obligations are. Critically important and large obligations, and what our expectations for them are. It's very important to understand those and come to a determination about them, and I've been seeking to do that in part because, as I mentioned, and you all know, we are one university. We have one set of fiduciary responsibilities, and it's important that the athletic department be able and capable of meeting its obligations for the university because they are all of our obligations. And so we have a fundamental and important interest in the financial success of our athletic program for many reasons. Their great competitive success, very important, but also because we have some important financial obligations that we have budgetarily assigned to our athletic department, and it is in our interest to make sure, it's in the general interest of all of us, the campus, to make sure that those obligations can be satisfied in the appropriate ways, as they are being now. So first order activity, we need to pay attention to that. So then my analysis would say, given the satisfaction of our existing obligations, is it appropriate? It's appropriate to determine whether and how revenue generated by athletics can create additional benefits to the entire campus. And I say additional because, in my estimation, I think the estimation of most of us, the benefits provided to the campus are very considerable and substantial, even, admittedly, as they are difficult to assign monetary value to. And this is the aim of our analysis and my analysis, and I believe the appropriate analysis with appropriate consultation from the faculty and the faculty budget committees and the like. Kind of jumping way ahead, my own study leads me to the preliminary conclusion that our focus in budgeting from this point should be on future revenue opportunities as current obligations are satisfied and current budgets have been agreed with. Future revenue opportunities that will provide revenue as of yet unbudgeted, particularly, I would say, from the Pac-12 network opportunities, but perhaps also from licensing. Now, these future revenues, I say, are as of yet to be derived, and they're not entirely within our discretion. We participate, of course, with our Pac-12 colleagues, and there are collective decisions that are made about those expenditures, but certainly there are great opportunities, and there's a great promise for additional revenue from that source. That, in my judgment, too, is the revenue that many of our colleagues have pointed to, colleagues at other institutions, as they talk about generating additional support, or, as some of them talk about, reducing their own general campus support of their athletic programs. The first order obligation, and these are agreements that have been established in setting up the Pac-12 network, but which we are party to and which we agreed to, again, prior to my own arrival here, is to generate or to create the network, fund it, and allow it to express its own, or to meet its potential objectives going on now. My discussions with the Vice President for Finance and Administration and Athletic Director are focusing on the potential for unbudgeted revenues, how they can best be deployed across the entire budgets of the university as we move forward. And we're going to have to anticipate to some degree what that will be, but then we will find in the fullness of time how those funds are realized. I think that's an important focus of our attention and should be in discussions about how to budget in the future at the U of O with respect to athletics. I also want to speak directly to one point that's been widely discussed on the campus, legitimately so, importantly so, and that has to do with one aspect of the financial budgeting of athletics in the campus, only one aspect, and that has to do with academic tutoring for student athletes being supported through academic unit budgets. I say it's only one aspect, and my caution to everyone in talking about budgets, I've learned this over the course of time, that really it's very difficult, highly problematic to focus on a single aspect of a general budget without considering simultaneously all of the revenues and sources. Difficult to do, and that's why such discussions, in my view, are appropriately delegated to budget committees and budget advisory committees that can spend the appropriate time and analysis in making these general assessments. But with respect to this one issue, I have strong views about this matter, and some of them were derived from work I did at other institutions. There's no question in my mind that the academic tutoring and counseling and the financial aspects for that should be structured in the way that it is. The academic parts of the university, academic units, simply must have authority over academic tutoring wherever it takes place, academic advising wherever it takes place, and therefore the proper budgetary line is from the academic budget. Some have raised the question, is this a subsidy? Well, my impression is probably not. I don't think so. Not in the ordinary connotation of the term subsidy. Because to come to that analysis requires some consideration of the full flow of funds among our budgeted units. So, for example, the athletic department on our campus pays the full cost of tuition for their student athletes. Footnote, many of our peer institutions do not do that. They instead provide tuition waivers for student athletes. That's an important consideration in comparing how general funds for universities support athletic budgets. In our case, we require a full tuition support to be provided, and the athletic department provides that full tuition support. Now here, it's a bit complex, but the athletic department pays, since they pay tuition for scholarship athletes, and a disproportionate proportion of these student athletes are non-resident, disproportionate by campus averages. This creates a revenue stream paid by the athletic program to the general fund budget of the campus that seems to me to be in excess of the cost, the differential cost for the academic tutoring. So that looks to me to be sort of a push. So that one analysis would suggest that, from my own observation, that is not correctly described as a subsidy. But this is only a single element of a very complex matter, one that we should continue to study, one that we should continue to deliberate on, and the one that should be addressed by a full view of the budgets involved in a deliberate way, using appropriate advisory committees, essential. As you know, I've said it repeatedly, one of my essential features of shared governance, in my view, is a strong advisory role on budgets and finances. So, and I am told that the athletic budgets have been discussed repeatedly by the Senate Budget Committee annually, which is appointed by the Senate President. I'm told they do that every year. I'm sure we'll do it this year because I asked to be put on their agenda. I made it onto the second meeting, which is going to take place, I think, in a couple of weeks, to discuss these matters with the Senate Budget Committee. An appropriate consultation, it seems to me. I would like to understand their views. I would like to understand and have the athletic department and budget officials describe these revenue flows and get consultation from them in the appropriate way. So I'm looking forward to that. It does address the Senate motion that we have already received in the resolution, and I think it is being done in an appropriate way, in a deliberate way, in the appropriate fashion. For the general budget issues, and I think that we've asked and they've agreed that the Senate Budget Advisory Group, which traditionally reviews budgets on the academic side, will include discussions on auxiliary budgets, that the Senate Budget Committee has been appointed. 4 of the 6 members of the Senate Budget Committee are on the Budget Advisory Committee, and I'm also informed that 2 additional faculty members, one from the Faculty Advisory Council and one from the Research Advisory Board, are also on that committee. So that's an important structure, appropriate structure to continue this discussion as it relates to the overall university budget, and is clearly and obviously and importantly in very strong alignment with the letter and spirit of the concept of shared governance, and certainly has my personal commitment and involvement in that process. Kind of returning to kind of a general issue, and I think it's important to say this because we all appreciate it, and I think we all have this view. I certainly do. Our athletic program is very substantially and appropriately committed to our academic mission. Our coaches and athletic administrators are excellent advocates of our students as student athletes. They operate in that way in every instance that I've been able to observe, and I appreciate it very much. They do a terrific job. Terrific representatives of the university in many contexts. Again, our students and our student athletes are just a terrific credit to us, both on and off the field, just all the time. It's a great benefit to us, great value to us. We are certainly not ignoring the financial issues. They're very important. They're critically important. They've been increasing in importance as the revenues and the expenditures for athletics have really approached at an astonishing level. We're struggling to get it right. Our peers are struggling to get it right. We need your help to balance competitiveness and excellence, but always keep our academic mission at the center, as we do. I think as our program has, did before I came, does now, seems to me. Keep our academic focus at the center, where it belongs, where it is now, and as a credit to the institution. I may have taken my full 2 minutes. President Paris, appreciate it very much, and thanks for the opportunity to make comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate that. Would you like some Q&A?
If that would be appropriate. I know we have a full agenda.
Well, I think we can take about 5 minutes, if that's okay with you. So this is for my colleagues on the Senate, and I would ask you to address your questions to me, as is our tradition. Senator Sullivan.
I can tell by, first of all, thank you for the explanation concerning the issues surrounding the athletic department budget issues. I can tell that you are very interested in shared governance and that you're concerned that it goes through appropriate channels. However, have you considered sometimes speaking directly with senators who are proposing motions so that political issues can be resolved in a more person-to-person basis, because sometimes channels can get in the way of effective leadership instead of exclusively relying on channels?
Advice, I appreciate that.
Senator Harbaugh. And please address comments and questions to me, as is our tradition.
So, Margie, would you relay this to President Godfredson that...
He's actually hearing the question as it's coming
I see.
to me.
Sorry. So I would like to say that I would like to discuss this with President Godfredson. I'd also like to point out that his statements about addressing these issues with the Senate Budget Committee has no senators on it. The Budget Advisory Committee group, I think, also has no senators on it. The Senate Budget Committee has not met in 6 months. They had their first meeting a week ago. They have not reported to the Senate, from what I can tell, since 2009. So the institutions that President Godfredson hopes to rely on to conduct shared governance are not really functioning appropriately. And, I think the faculty bears some responsibility for that. The Senate bears some responsibility for that. But I also think that President Godfredson bears some responsibility for it, because the truth is that he has not consulted with these groups. He has not consulted with the Senate about these issues. And what it took, I'm sorry to say this so bluntly, but what it took to get him to come here and give this speech to the Senate about these athletic issues was not just the resolution, which he waited the full 2 months to make any response to us about, but was this proposed legislation. Before that, we really hadn't had any honest discussion about these issues from him. So I guess my question is, how can we move forward with an issue that's this serious when we're not being consulted seriously as faculty? President Godfredson just stood up and talked to us for 15 minutes. He didn't mention a single number. There are no documents that he's provided us about the athletic budget. This is a strange way to conduct shared governance without shared information.
Is the question on the floor?
Are you concluding your question, Senator Harbaugh?
Yeah, I guess that wasn't a very good question. I conclude.
I haven't heard one. Was there? So Senator Paris, thanks. Senator Harbaugh. So disagree about a number of the matters that you just indicated, but I would say this, that I think this. I'm eager to meet with the Senate Budget Committee. It had not met and have sought to be on their agenda, and I'm now on their agenda for in 2 weeks. And my understanding of our organization, Shared Governance, is that there is a Senate Budget Committee that is the appropriate body for discussion, advisory, consultation about the budget. So if I'm wrong about that, it's useful to be advised about that, but it does seem that the Senate Budget Committee would be the advisory committee to consult with about the budget, and I'm eager to do that. The Campus Budget Committee does have faculty. I'm actually not, I don't know whether senators are actually on it or not. Someone might be able to speak to that as faculty members, but it certainly has faculty on it. Eager to find ways to explore these issues in more detail or with greater consultation, but that is the body that it appears through the Senate materials to be, and I have been told, is the appropriate Senate Budget Advisory Committee. So I look forward to working with them.
Thank you very much, and I think at this point we do need to excuse you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Can I address a question to the Senate President?
You may address a question to me, yes.
Yes. Does the Senate President recall that the Senate does not discuss motions until after they have been made?
Thank you. All right, and so we now move into the fourth item on our agenda, which is new business, and this is the time when we hear motions. Senator Harbaugh.
I would like...
Oh, Joey, can we get a mic down here? right here to Senator Harbaugh. Raise your, yeah.
So I would like to move that we restore the following motion to the Senate agenda for today, and the motion is an end to subsidies for the U of O athletic department.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of restoring the motion entitled End to Athletic Subsidies, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries. It's a majority vote. Any other business?
I think I would now like to move the motion, given that it's been restored to the agenda.
Is there a second to Senator Harbaugh's motion to end subsidies to the athletic department? Any discussion? Well, first we should read, I'm forgetting my rules. This is my job to read the motion that Lisa has put up on the screen. Section 1, whereas in 2004, the UO Athletics Task Force, which included President Dave Frohnmeyer, Athletic Director Bill Moose, NCAA Faculty Athletics Representative Jim O'Fallon, the Senate President, and many Senate and faculty representatives, concluded a 3-year study of UO athletics with a report that stated as recommendation number 1, the task force and the athletic department recommend a voluntary financial contribution by athletics to the Presidential Scholarship Fund. 1.2, and whereas in 2008, the Senate passed a resolution reiterating this recommendation. 1.3, and whereas in May 2012, the UO Senate passed another resolution endorsed by 4 former Senate presidents in its stronger form legislation, requesting that President direct the athletic department to end subsidies for athletics starting on 7/1/2013 and start making payments for academic purposes starting in 7/1/2014. 1.4, and whereas 2 months after the 2012 resolution, President Gottfredson wrote to the Senate President Margie Paris that, quote, one intent of the resolution is to ensure that athletics is paying an appropriate share of the costs associated with tutoring and advising of student athletes and for the arena. This is clearly an appropriate aim and one with which I am fully supportive. More analysis needs to be undertaken to ascertain the nature of these obligations while preserving legitimate expectations derived from the existing agreements. We will expeditiously work to resolve these issues in collaboration with athletics, end quote. 1.4, and whereas the subsidies have not ended, and to the contrary, the payments from the provost budget to support tutoring and advising at the Jaquith Center for Student Athletes, services that are available only to student athletes, have increased from $600,000 in 2008 to $1.8 million for FY 2011-12, and then to $2.2 million this year after passage of the 2012 resolution. These services cost about $4,000 per student athlete, while UO's spending on similar services for non-athlete students averages only about $225. 1.5, and whereas the athletic department solicits donations and ticket surcharges for the Duck Athletic Fund totaling approximately $30 million for 2012-2013, with the statement that, quote, the mission of the Duck Athletic Fund is to raise funds to offset the expenses of student athletic scholarships and related athletic department support at the University of Oregon, end quote. 1.6, and whereas in the most recently available data for 2011-12, the athletic department paid only $7 million from these DAF funds to the academic side for tuition and did not pay any of the cost of student-athlete services other than a portion of the maintenance costs of the Jaquith building. 1.7, and whereas UO's academic budget has been paying $467,538 a year since 2009 to repay the portion of bonds used to purchase the Knight Arena land representing the area of the Mac Court land. 1.8, and whereas 9 years have now passed since the 2004 task force report calling for voluntary contributions from athletics toward academic scholarships, during which annual operating expenditures by the athletic department have increased from less than $40 million to more than $90 million. 1.9, and whereas during that time the athletic department has not made any such contributions and in fact has received increasing subsidies from the academic budget. Section 2, 2.1, be it hereby moved that the athletic department shall pay from its budget the full cost of providing tutoring and academic support for student athletes beginning in fiscal year 2013-14, and that these funds should be directed to general academic purposes. 2.2, Be it further moved that the athletic department shall pay from its budget the full cost of the bonds used to purchase the Knight Arena land beginning in FY 2013-14, and that these funds should be directed to general academic purposes. 2.3, be it further moved that these payments shall retroactively cover the full cost of Jaques Center services and bond payments from 7/1/2013 forward. 2.3, be it further moved that the President shall provide the Senate with a budget and a schedule for implementation for reasonable payments from the Athletic Department budget for the support of general academic purposes no later than the first Senate meeting of the 2014-15 session. Thus ends the reading of the motion. And this is the discussion portion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Senator Joey, thank you.
It seems to me that the intent of this motion is to make sure that the athletic department helps pay its fair share to cover its ever-growing budget from its own ever-growing income streams, rather than allowing it to continue to be a drain on the academic side. This is just a simple matter of fairness to the vast majority of students who are not athletes and who are disadvantaged with every dollar that's redirected towards athletics and away from the general academics. This motion is specifically not intended to marginalize student athletes, all of whom have the same academic needs that every other student has. To highlight this point, I'd like to submit an amendment to the motion, and that is instead of removing all of the subsidies for tutoring and advising, my amendment would simply normalize them to the per-student average for non-student athletes. So in current numbers, that would take the portion of the subsidy from $4,000 per student athlete down to the $225 per student average across the rest of the university. Then, of course, nothing would prevent athletics from paying above and beyond that level for tutoring and advising for student athletes, but that money would have to come from some other income stream, from their own income streams.
Senator Dassenville, can you state the exact language of your amendment?
Yeah.
Tell us where it goes.
So in section 2, 2.1, my suggestion would be something along the lines of, be it hereby moved that the subsidies to the athletic department for tutoring and academic support for student athletes be reduced on a per-student basis to the same level as that of non-athlete students beginning in fiscal year 2013-14, with the remainder of these funds redirected to general academic purposes.
I think for purposes of our Senate Executive Coordinator, I'm going
slower?
to have to ask you to read that once more.
Yes.
So a little slower.
So I'll
and this is
stop and stress the
2.1,
changes.
and your amendment replaces 2.1?
Yeah, it's a revision to that, yeah. So 2.1, be it hereby moved that the subsidies to the athletic department for tutoring and academic support for student athletes.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Be reduced on a per-student basis to the same level as that of non-athlete students.
Period?
Beginning in fiscal year 2013-14. That's down below. Yeah. And then with the final clause, with the remainder of these funds directed to general academic purposes. I'm certainly willing to entertain.
Is that accurately
rewording it.
Is that accurately your amendment? So after 2013-14, does that phrase "and that these funds," does that come out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's correct.
So this has been this motion has been, or this amendment has been moved. Is there a second? Discussion on the amendment only now. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendment to the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed to the amendment to the motion say no. So the amendment carries. So now the main motion appears before you, having been amended. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Mr. Provost.
I don't know how to say this delicately, but I'd kind of like to know what's going on here. I mean, what is the goal of this legislation which truly exceeds the power of the Senate? Senate does not have budgetary authority. So you're setting up a confrontation with the president who will either ignore, I would estimate, ignore or veto the motion. It's confrontational politics. What do you want to get out of that? What are we trying to do here? I would say what we need to do is collaborate. These issues are not something that we're ignoring in administration. They're not something that you're ignoring. You need to be able to collaborate with the administration, not confront and do a power grab. I mean, it's just not going to help. You can do it. It's within your purview. We need to discuss the issues. We need to talk about the hard questions that these raise. But I don't understand what the outcome goal is here, how a positive vote on this legislation will resolve that. A resolution, yes, which you passed, which we're working with, which we're more than happy to provide information about the budgetary restriction. Thanks.
So in the order in which I see these hands, it's Senator Harbaugh and then Senator Sullivan. And then Senator Marjoram, and that was it. Okay.
So,
and Senator Delba. Thank you.
yes, so my goal with this is I'm trying to be constructive with this, Scott, and I think I've tried to be constructive with this process all the way along. I've spent a lot of time just trying to get information about the athletic department budget, and I think you have some idea of how difficult that was. And to do, it took a petition to the Attorney General, among other things. I don't think that the Senate can constructively engage with the administration without that sort of information. I went to great lengths to get it. I went to great lengths to try to develop a collaborative process with the administration with no confrontation that would get the administration to take these issues seriously. These issues have been on the table since 2001, when the Senate and the president of the university agreed that what was going on then was too extreme. Since then, the budget has more than doubled for athletics. There's been no contribution to the academic side. In 2012, I put this motion, a similar motion, forward as legislation. But when people pointed out that it would be taken as confrontational, I quickly agreed to turn it into a resolution in the hopes that that would foster some constructive discussion and collaboration with the university administration. That has not happened. As you know from the timeline, it was 2 months, the last possible date at which the president even responded to the resolution. It took this new proposal to get him to come to the Senate and say what he just said. The Senate Budget Committee, which you're relying on to act as the intermediary here, doesn't even have a single senator on it, and has been ineffective, noticeably ineffective in the past at dealing with this. Look at the long history since 2001. So I'm more than willing to try to figure out a collaborative way to work with the administration on this, but everything we have tried so far has been a failure. I welcome a serious suggestion from you on how to move this forward.
Senator Sullivan.
First of all, I can't let it stand that the Senate can have nothing to do with budgeting. There's nothing in the Constitution preventing it from doing so, as long as it relates to legitimate academic issues, which the academic connection with this has been established.
Randy, make sure your voice is...
Oh, the academic connection with this has been established. Nothing prevents us from dabbling in budgetary matters. What we're seeing here is a broken political system. This is a political problem. And the problem is that we have two very powerful people who disagree. the president of this institution who wields power on the basis of the fact that he is the president of this institution. And Bill Harbaugh, who is powerful. He has real political power. He has real political power because he does his homework, something which all of us as educators can respect. And he has done the hard political work of mobilizing his constituency through his blog. That is the way political change is affected. One of the ways popular political change is affected. Now, if we or the president ignore the fact that Bill Harbaugh has real political power regardless of what committees he sits on, we do so at our own danger. We need Bill Harbaugh and a real delegate from the president to sit down at a table together and hammer out a compromise, something that neither of them particularly cares for, but that both of them can live with. That is the way.
As I said, I'm all for a compromise. Thank you.
I know you are. Oh, so is the president. Just listen to him. So if you sit down at a table and talk, what's happening here is the Senate's getting caught between two powerful people, and we do not have the tools to deal with this. We need the power brokers to sit down at a table together. I suggest that we form an ad hoc committee consisting of Bill and any other senators who will volunteer, who feel themselves to be qualified to rule on this issue, that they are charged to invite members from the administration who are empowered to bargain, to come to the table, that they report back at the first meeting of the spring quarter, and with either this legislation or a mutually agreeable piece of legislation. That's how it's done.
Senator Sullivan, are you moving a substantive motion to create an ad hoc committee to which we would refer this motion?
I first of all move that the agenda be changed to consider such a motion.
Mr. Parliamentarian, there's a motion to amend the agenda to consider a substantive motion. Is that in order during a discussion on this motion?
To amend what you really want to do is move to amend all right. Putting forward a substitute motion to replace this, which is an amendment to this motion by replacing the motion with a substitute motion.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
Randy, I'm all in favor of what you're proposing. I want this motion to stay on the table in the meantime because I think it does have power, and I think that because...
I move to postpone this motion until the first meeting of spring.
I second.
The motion on the table is to postpone this motion.
My motion, yes.
Until the first meeting of the Senate in...
Not in spring. Sorry, not spring. Winter. The second meeting of winter, then.
I move.
We've gone for a long time.
I move to postpone this until the second meeting of the winter term.
So it's been moved and seconded that the motion be postponed to a date certain, and that is the February meeting of the University Senate. Is there discussion on the motion to postpone? Is that a discussable motion, Mr. Parliamentarian? Is that a discussable motion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Postpone to a definite date.
To a definite date.
Definite date, yes.
Any discussion? Senator Delabow.
If this motion is postponed. This is just a procedural question. If this motion is postponed, then we can revisit the other motion to create an ad hoc. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
It appears
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Thank you. And I realized before I recognize Professor Stahl, Senator Marjoram, you had been recognized earlier, and we didn't get to you.
Similar sentiment that I felt I supported the concerns underlying this motion, but I didn't feel that I felt the way it was crafted was necessarily the best way to go about doing it. And so I support this. I think it'd be much better to come back with something that's been negotiated, makes sense, and is going to be supported from both sides rather than put something forward that's just a legislative bomb that's not going to go anywhere. So.
Thank you. Professor Stahl.
What are we discussing?
Is there a... yeah, there's the motion to postpone. Motion to postpone.
Yes. Let me remind people of the way the Constitution is supposed to work at this point. If this body passes Bill Harbaugh's legislation, then the Constitution requires that there be negotiation between the Senate and the President. That negotiation could well be carried out by a committee such as is suggested by who? Somebody called Randy. Randy Sullivan. Okay. The proper order of events would be for the Senate to deal with Bill Harbaugh's motion. We're sure that the President would express his disapproval, and then there would be solid grounds for creating a committee that would report back to this Senate the results of negotiations that would give us a compromise that would prevent having to call an assembly to deal with this. That is, could bring forward a motion that would in fact be satisfactory to the Senate and to the President.
Senator Harbaugh, we're still discussing the motion to postpone.
So I appreciate Frank's comments, and to be honest, I thought of the same thing myself. But as I said to Scott, believe it or not, Scott, I am not trying to be confrontational here. I've been at this university for 18 years. I've seen millions of these subsidies come and go. I'm in this for the long haul. I am perfectly willing to go with Randy's motion to table this, postpone this for a couple meetings in the hope of hammering out something that will finally kill this thing. So I mean, I'm happy to hear more questions, but I think we could move on here, hopefully.
Senator Delabaugh wishes to be recognized on the motion to postpone.
I'm an optimist, and I also have been at the university for a long time, and in the spirit of collaboration, I also would support the motion to postpone and to understand that there's been a lot of change in leadership. There's been a tremendous amount of change this year across campus that has overburdened everyone, and that our sense of time, while yes, it's been decades, I think we're in an opportunity to actually make progress. And part of that progress with the postponing this would be also take a look at the broken systems in terms of the various committees that are not well, they don't have the right membership on them. So I think I would support postponing this in favor of moving towards a collaborative, synergistic energy.
Is there Senator Harbaugh?
Can I call the question?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to vote on Randy's motion to postpone this till February.
Question has been called. Second on the and this is to call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. So the motion now, as it reads, the question is a motion to postpone this motion to a date certain, and that is the date of our February Senate meeting, whatever date that is that I don't have in my head right now. All those in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion carries. Motion to postpone carries. Senator Sullivan.
Motion to change the agenda to introduce a substantive motion to form an ad hoc committee.
Second.
So there's a motion on the floor to amend the agenda. All those, is there discussion on that motion? Professor Stahl.
I'd like to know what the composition of that committee would be, and do we have any assurance that if it includes the President, he will agree to be part of such an ad hoc committee?
Well, we're right now just on the motion to amend the agenda, so let's hold that off till we discuss the motion. Any other discussion on the motion to amend the agenda? All those in favor of the motion to amend, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. Motion to amend carries.
I move to form an ad hoc committee consisting of Bill Harbaugh, and let me see some hands. Let me see some hands. There.
Jane Kramer, Reza Raje, Sam Dodders-Katz, Jenny Ellis. Can't read. Thank you.
That should be big enough. That's a student. Yeah, do we get those names?
Can I suggest that we restrict this to voting members of the Senate?
You can.
I do.
I think we're going to take all those hands, though. That's the way I'm going to let it stand. You're going to have to deal with non-voting members. So that's the composition of the ad hoc committee I'm proposing. The charge is to consider redrafting this legislation with the express intent that they will solicit input from the office of the president. There is no guarantee, Frank.
So the motion is to form an ad hoc committee that will sum this up in a more succinct way.
That will redraft a proposal, a motion of the same title or similar title, that will redraft this motion for submission and consideration by the Senate, and that they will expressly invite participation by the President's office.
And is there a second on that motion? Is there a second to that motion? There is no second to your motion.
I have a question.
Okay.
Before I'm willing to consider seconding that, but I'd like.
Yes.
And since this hasn't been seconded, I think you can change it.
Yes, I can.
So I would like to be the chair because I made the original motion.
Yes.
And President Gottfredson is sitting in the back. I am wondering if he would be willing to agree to meet with such a committee.
I think we don't want to put him on the spot. This is enough of a spot.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion that's seconded to form this ad hoc committee. Is there discussion on the motion? Yes, Senator Jean.
I wonder, is there any mechanism we can make sure that we are going to wasting our time in our next meeting? In put in a different way, we will be any possible mechanism we can see some collaboration or some communication between these ad hoc committee and the administration office. My worry is that this will be a one-side communication, and if that is the case, we are going to enter into a worse situation than today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion on the motion to form an ad hoc committee? Professor Stahl.
I'd like to repeat what I said before that was out of order, and now it perhaps is in order. The constitutional procedure would have us deal with Bill's motion, and when it was passed and it was understood that the president disapproved, there would be set up a system of negotiation between the Senate and the president of the university. Such a negotiating system might well involve, perhaps most effectively involve, a committee of which the president of the university, Bill Harbaugh, and a few others would be members, who would report to the Senate the results of their negotiation in the hopes that a fully satisfactory compromise had been reached. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
What is proper and what is expedient are frequently two different things. If we do confrontational politics, everybody loses. I see several ways of this ending up with an article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and you hear that sound? That's donors' wallets snapping shut. None of us want that. None of us want that. And we all realize that that's where this is heading if we don't come to something, to a successful resolution of this. This may not be the proper way to do it, but it is the politically expedient way of dealing with this.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. President Godfredson.
I support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion to form the ad hoc committee say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is motion under the agenda listed as 4.1, a motion ending academic credit for ROTC. Will the mover of the motion say that he so moves?
Yes, I so move.
The motion is as follows. Section 1.1. Whereas the overwhelming penetration of militarism into our society has brought within it an increase in wars of aggression and weakening the liberties guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, including freedom of the press, the right of the people peaceably to assemble, the right to be secure in persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, freedom from secret warrants, freedom from deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, the right to a speedy and public trial, and freedom from cruel and unusual punishments. And 1.2, whereas these consequences of militarism have gone hand in hand with the loss of democracy in our country. 1.3, whereas there is a fundamental disconnect between the university's responsibility to develop the art of independent thinking and its support of a program that is, by its very nature, hierarchical and authoritarian. And 1.4, whereas a peaceable recovery of our democracy and our civil liberties will require a piece-by-piece reduction in the influence of the military in all our institutions, especially in our schools and colleges. And 1.5, whereas the University of Oregon can contribute to this recovery in a concrete and nonviolent manner by removing military science courses from its curriculum. Section 2, be it hereby moved that not less than 3 nor more than 4 years from the date on which this legislation becomes effective according to Section 7.2.1.1 of the UO Constitution, the university shall no longer grant academic credit for courses offered by the Department of Military Science. Financial impact unknowable. Sponsor, Professor Frank Stahl, Biology. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Senator Dreiling seconds the motion. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Professor Stahl.
I have a very brief discussion. The whereas has pretty much covered it. Universities have often struggled with the disconnect between their responsibility to develop the art of independent thinking and their support of a program that is, by its very nature, hierarchical and authoritarian. Despite this fundamental problem, were our military engaged strictly in the defense of American democracy, the university might choose to maintain its long-standing association with the United States Department of Defense. At present, however, the military is serving as the muscle for what is seen by many to be the world's most dangerous and deadly rogue state. Under these circumstances, it is clearly not appropriate for the university to give academic credit in support of the ROTC program. The University of Oregon can contribute to the restoration of our democracy in a modest but concrete and nonviolent manner by removing military science courses from its curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stahl. In preparation for our discussion, I thought it might be useful for the senators to have some data from the registrar about these courses. And so I've asked our registrar, Sue Eveland, to compile some quick data, and I think we also can project that on the screen as well. So, Registrar Eveland, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm not sure you can read that, but I took a look at the students who graduated last academic year. Undergraduate students, 4,675 of them graduated with a degree. Of those, 212 students used military science credit earned at U of O as a part of their degree. 106 of those, fully half of those, used only 2 credits in their degree. So not We don't generate a lot of credits. Not very many of our students use credit in their degree programs. And further, more than half of the students in those courses are not in the ROTC program, the Officer Training Program. They are students who are seeking the leadership courses that are taught through our Military Science Department. The second set of data at the bottom is a current term courses, enrollments, and credit hours. You can see all the courses all undergrad courses on the left. 2.2% of the credit hours generated this fall are from that department. Questions for me?
Are there questions for the registrar? Senator Kramer. Hold on one second while we get the mic over there.
I just wanted to know what the courses were in general. Do you have that?
I did not bring a list. No. Ken Doxey has a list. Maybe I should let him take the mic. You want to take the mic? So, by the way, all these courses went through the course approval system, and this morning I looked to see how long they've been on the books and approved and being taught, and we looked all the way back to 1974 and we gave up. Our current SIS, we have to look in every catalog. We have to go backwards. Our SIS system only goes back to 1990, and we were fully, we had these courses on the books when we transitioned into Banner then. So we have our Introduction to Military Science 121, 122 to 123, a couple of physical training courses. Leadership Laboratory is the one I'm referring to, the 191 Leadership Lab. There's a series of 200-level courses, military science, and 300-level courses. Those are full-year sequences. There's a physical training class, and then there's a fourth year. And my understanding is that only students in the ROTC program can take the 300 and 400-level courses. Those courses are reserved for students who are in the training program and will be commissioned at the graduation to go on into officer roles in our armed services. I hope I said that well. Thank you.
Thank you, and please remain in the room, so if we have further questions, but you can sit down.
Go back to my seat.
Yeah, thank you. But if we have further questions, I appreciate your serving as a resource. Discussion on the motions. Senator Garcia-Caro.
It's a question for the proponent of the motion, and it's in relation to that culture of warmongering and pacifism that he seems to be critiquing ideologically through the motion. And one of the things that we discussed the other day in the Senate Executive Committee is whether, and of course this is why I want to bring it here in front of the whole Senate, is whether, that's just one way of looking at the ROTC on campus, and an alternate way, which actually opened my eyes as it was discussed by our own parliamentarian, and I would like him to reiterate his opinions if he might, or if he will, is that actually the ROTC embedded on a campus might civilize, humanize, and create a much more complex army officer than a school of the Americas, for instance, or any other such type of military training compound. Would you please address that?
May I? Please, Professor Stahl.
I think what our parliamentarian may remember, and you all notice that he's about my age, is that there was a period in American history, when large numbers of people were conscripted into the Army, and ROTC, this is World War II and the Korean War, and ROTC programs made it possible for people who weren't militarily inclined to escape the draft as an enlisted person by joining an ROTC program. So there were, in fact, many people in the ROTC program who really weren't warriors at heart. They went into the ROTC program to escape being troops on the being dog feet, if you will, if you pardon the expression. And I think in that period, officers who got their training through the regular universities being a selected group of people who really didn't want to fight, and the best way to not, at least not be, at least to have some privileges and comforts, were in fact those people who were in the universities. Now that we have no conscription, people who opt for an ROTC program are people who want to participate in the military. And I see no reason to think that those people will have a broader view of life than would those who go to our very elite academies, West Point or Annapolis and so forth, for the same reason. Thank you.
Thank you. I see in this order Senators Landrum, Daughters Katz, Harbaugh, and Kramer, and Dreiling. Senator Landrum. Joey, thank you.
So in the interest of full disclosure, I am a University of Oregon ROTC graduate. I came to the University of Oregon after about 8 years on active duty. I was a Russian translator. The Army taught me to speak Russian. I came back to the University of Oregon because I grew up in this area. ROTC for me was a way to better myself. It paid for my college. It gave me an opportunity to further my career. One of the aspects of this particular motion that struck a chord with me was the hierarchical and authoritarian environment. I would pose that most Army officers in deployments have to be more creative and more flexible and more responsive to what's going on than many people can ever imagine. You're very limited in your options, and you have to think on your feet. My limitation in this hierarchical training, still I managed to be successful in the MBA program at Syracuse University. So I would strongly disagree with that. It is not a brainwashing program. It is an opportunity to serve your country and take advantage of educational benefits and make something of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Daughters Katz.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, I wanted to acknowledge that there are several students here today that are part of the ROTC program, and I wanted to say that I appreciate y'all being here. I have a couple of remarks I'd like to make, but I was pretty struck by one I just heard that I need to address. Likening the experiences of these students in the ROTC program and the experience that they'll have in the military, trying to equate that to dog food, I think is incredibly offensive, and I wanted to address that. When I first heard about this motion, I wanted to try and gauge what the opinion was of students of the ROTC and what the opinion of this motion might be for students. So I first went to the Survival Center, which is in the Student Union. It is, for those who don't know, probably the most radical place on campus. It's where the anarchist student newspaper is housed. And when I spoke with the folks in there, they laughed. They found that whatever anyone's personal frustrations might be with the military, that a motion that punishes the students in the ROTC program, many of which come from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, is completely the wrong way to go about it. And they actually laughed at this motion. And then I went to go speak to the students in ROTC, and they weren't laughing at all. This body continually opines about the importance of broad consultation with constituencies that are affected by the decisions we make. And not one student was talked to about this motion, even though it would deeply affect their experience on this campus. Not one student in ROTC was spoken with. Not one member of the student leadership, student government was spoken with. And it would be incredibly hypocritical of this body to pass a motion that was drafted through such a process. And it would be taken as a signal by the student government that there is no longer any interest in dialogue with the elected leadership of the student government on issues that affect our student body. And I ask members of this body that are considering voting for this motion on the merits to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. The order right now is Senator Delabaus, Senator Harbaugh, and Senator Kramer. Did I get all of them? And Senator Dreiling, thank you. Were you first?
This is Senator Delabo. Just as a follow-up, we did get a letter from Joey Burgess, ASUO University Affairs Commissioner, that the official statement from the ASUO president concerning ROTC Senate motion is strongly opposed to this motion. So, I want to just say that was sent out, and I was going to present that, so I'm just confirming.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Harbaugh? Mike Cumming.
So I'm going to make a motion. I think if President Gottfriedson and I can sit down and talk about athletics, maybe Frank Stahl can sit down with the ROTC leadership and talk about his proposal here. And so I move that the Senate appoints an ad hoc committee consisting of Frank Stahl and interested ROTC leaders and students to consider this motion.
Well,
I'm
and
consulting.
meanwhile, the motion be postponed.
All right. So this is a motion to postpone to an indefinite time and to create an ad hoc committee. Is there a second? Motion is seconded. Discussion on the motion to postpone to an uncertain date. Professor Stahl.
If this were a complex issue with a number of different points, as was the case with Bill Harbaugh's motion, with the possibility of finding some kind of compromise by balancing the various issues against each other and seeing if progress could be made that was satisfactory to both the Senate and the President, I would concur. My motion is very simple. It's simply academic credit or no academic credit. I don't see any way to compromise on that, so I don't really see any point of having a committee to discuss, whether we might give half as much academic credit. Oh, I don't think so. I think it's a matter of, does the university want to help students get trained for an activity that threatens not only our democracy and our Bill of Rights, but threatens also the viability of the world as the military carries out its activities to control other countries in pursuit of their petroleum resources in order that they can further promote global climate destabilization. I don't see the possibility that any kind of a compromise could come out of such a discussion. And the possibility that I would change my mind is zilch.
So on the motion to postpone, remember we're discussing the motion to postpone. I saw hands from Professor Doxey, Senator Harbaugh, Senator Delabo. Vice Provost Doxey, sorry.
Ken Doxey, Professor of Chemistry, I'll start with, and Associate Vice Provost for Academic Affairs.
Thank you.
Also ex officio on the ROTC Advisory Committee. I was planning to make these comments in response to the original motion, but I think my conclusion fits here equally well, perhaps. I'll read to be brief. As Frank just noted, the motion is to deny academic credit for military science courses. 178 students are currently participating in credit-bearing military science courses. Of these students, over half, 95 of those, are not ROTC students, but rather members of the general UO undergraduate population to whom enrollment in lower division military science courses is open. The 22 military science courses currently on the books received the same review and approval, including the establishment of appropriate course credit, as all other University of Oregon courses. This review and approval was by a university standing committee, the Committee on Courses, which is additionally charged, and I'll quote from its charge, with screening all proposals for course changes and for monitoring adherence to the approved curriculum standards and policies on an as-needed basis. This was my recommendation for the original motion, but I'll say that I think it applies here as well. I'd respectfully recommend that the Senate simply vote down the motion, the original motion. Should the Senate choose not to do so, I would equally respectfully suggest that a referral of the matter to the Committee on Courses would appear to be in accord with Senate policy for dealing with curricular matters. And that I view as relevant since I don't believe the Senate would need an ad hoc committee. They have a Committee on Courses that would address the issue of course credit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Doxey. Senator Harbaugh.
Yeah, so I think Frank's made it clear that he's not interested in discussing this. So there doesn't seem much point in appointing an ad hoc committee. So I withdraw that motion if I can do that. And I'll just say that my father went to college through the ROTC program. I've had lots of good students who've gone to college through the ROTC program. And I'm opposed to Frank's motion.
Despite your withdrawal of the motion, it's a seconded motion that we'll have to vote on. So further discussion on the motion to postpone, Senator Delabow, Senator Dreiling, and Senator Frazier. Thank you.
I'm against postponing this motion. I believe it should be brought to a vote here, and I would be against this motion for the reason being this is a very politicized, value-laden motion that may not represent the views, nor does it support the diversity of thinking that we are supposed to be representing at the university.
Thank you. Senator Dreiling, when the microphone arrives.
Here we go. Bill. Thank you. I'm also not supportive of postponing this motion. I would prefer a vote on it, as well as express my opinion that while I think it was an important subject to debate and open to the full Senate for conversation and deliberation, and there were a lot of guests here to be able to hear the motion and the discussion that followed, I also second comments made by others that I, not personally, but have family who have benefited from the kinds of work that ROTC programs have done. My sister, Lieutenant Colonel, and first generation in college. So I want to state basically what I see as Frank's motion bringing up, I think, a deep concern about militarism, a broader social concern, and yet he's wanting to address it in a way that just doesn't make sense. It harms leadership opportunities for students, college funding opportunities for students. There are practical nuances, I think, as we heard from Senator Caro, that military training on a university of this nature can offer to officers training. So I just appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion, separate the broader issues of concern for militarism and developing peaceful solutions to conflict, both abroad as well as in our own world, our own lives, etc. And there are opportunities for that on campus. From the actual motion, right? I mean, he's got these broad values, but they're pegged to, of course, a motion that does not directly connect to those values. So I'll end with that.
Thank you, Senator. And recall, we're still on the motion to postpone. Senator Frazier. And then perhaps we're ready to vote on the motion to postpone. Senator Frazier, you have the floor.
I'll call the question right after this. I'd just like to voice the opinions I've heard from various students on this issue. And the fact is that this program enables a lot of students who wouldn't have been able to come to college before, get a high-quality education. And I think we need to maintain a program that's allowing students to serve their country and get the education they need to better the workforce. And with that, I'll call the question.
Okay, is there a second on a call the question? This is the motion to postpone. It's been seconded. All those in favor of voting on the motion to postpone, say aye.
No, we'll vote to close debate.
Close debate on the motion to postpone, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. All those in favor of the motion to postpone, say aye. Aye. Opposed to the motion to postpone, say no. No. The motion to postpone fails. We're back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Senator Delabau. Is there a second to call the question? Okay. Okay. You're welcome. I know it's out of order.
Okay, I don't want to be out of order. I'll be brief.
Thank you.
I appreciate that many people have profited from the ROTC program. There's no question many people got an education for it. And that is from it, and that's a difficult price to pay. There are also many CEOs and stockholders who have profited from America's militarism. And I feel sorry for them, too, if militarism were to be reduced in this country. Thank you.
Senator Delabau's motion to call the question has been seconded. All those in favor of ending debate on the main motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries. All those in favor of the motion to end academic credit to ROTC, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
Motion fails. Senator Davidson. Oh, let's get a microphone to you.
I'm not sure what the proper characterization would be of what I need to say right now, but we actually didn't have any discussion on the substantive motion. All the discussion was on the procedure, and it was a matter that I appreciate that Frank raised, and that should have been substantively discussed. And saying that students gain leadership opportunities and that those opportunities are valuable and that that justifies this particular program is very unconvincing on many levels. There's all kinds of things that we could do. We could set up programs to have our students, business students, go around the world and help in factories that use child labor. And they might gain all sorts of benefits from that. But if the underlying activity that we're facilitating is wrong, then we shouldn't facilitate it.
Thanks. The next item on our agenda is the fall curriculum report. No, I'm sorry, is the change of membership for the undergraduate council will be moved by Senator Delabau. Who so moves? Is there? Let me read the motion, then we'll get a second.
Correction than debate. That's my hope, because Robert Kerr could not be here, and I'm happy to carry the motion.
Thank you very much. Here's the motion. Whereas the Undergraduate Council considered in its October 29, 2013 meeting a question raised by Senate leadership about whether the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies should be a member of the Undergraduate Council, and whereas the Undergraduate Council was also made aware of a recent Senate motion, part of the 10-year review of committees by the Committee on Committees, that designated that vice president as the convener of the Undergraduate Council but omitted mention of that person as an ex officio non-voting member. And whereas after discussing the matter and considering the membership structure of the Graduate Council, which includes both the Vice Provost for Graduate Studies and the Dean of the Graduate School as ex officio non-voting members, the Undergraduate Council concluded that the omission of the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies from the membership structure was a technical oversight that should be remedied immediately. Section 2, be it hereby moved that the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies shall serve as an ex officio non-voting member and convener of the Undergraduate Council. Is there a second? So it's been moved and seconded. Senator Delabau and then Professor Bonine.
I think I'm just asking to call the vote or a discussion. Is that the next step?
Oh, yes,
There's
I'm sorry, discussion on the motion. Professor Bonine.
I'm also a little bothered by the idea of calling immediately for questions before discussions have occurred, including on the previous one. And the reason I want to speak up, although you're welcome to rule me out of order, is there is a person, I believe he's a student, who had his hand up and wished to say something about ROTC. And I think if we model good democratic behavior here, what we should do is be very careful to look around, and I'm particularly interested in students. I'm not sure if you're a student, sir. Pardon me? but I would like to suggest that after this is disposed with, if you'll stay around, that you do recognize this student who had something to say, as I understand, about ROTC. I may also have something to say after that. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that comment, and I apologize. I did not see your hand. Further discussion on the motion at hand. All those in favor of the motion to change the membership of the Undergraduate Council, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion carries. And our last motion, is Lisa Wolverton here? Oh, Lisa, thank you. That's right, I did see you. The last motion is the fall curriculum report that will be given to us by Professor Lisa Wolverton in the stead of Professor Imamura. And this motion presents, very simply, the Committee on Courses Fall 2013 Preliminary Curriculum Report. And the motion is that it is moved. So moved that the Senate approve that report. Is there a second?
Do I need to read the amendments to the report?
No, because they're 39 pages, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the amendments to the report.
Oh, the
are right
amendments
here.
to the report.
So you have the preliminary report.
Okay.
The
good.
amendments that need to be added to the report are the general education approvals for biology 150 for the science group, for CIS 115 for the science group, and then 3 courses that will satisfy the arts and letters group requirement: Korean 309, History 186, and French 373. And then there is also a small, just for the record, there's a small typo that needs to be changed on page 21, whereby CIS 115, which is approved to count toward the BS and math and computer requirements, that will be effective winter 2014, and right now it says fall 2014. So that will become effective immediately. And other than that, that's our report.
Thank you very much. And you'll give us those changes for the record. Is there any discussion on the fall curriculum report? All those in favor of approving the fall curriculum report, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Thank you. That can... Yes.
Put it into order now.
I'll ask the Senate to suspend our order. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Thank you. Sir.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Godwin. I am a student of the university. I'm the Black Student Unit co-director. I also work for the Multicultural Center. But I also am a member of ROTC. And I guess what I do need to say is, as far as my story, as far as why I chose ROTC, it's like what many of you all said, as far as family members and things of that nature. I did choose it because I did need to find a way to pay for college. That was one of the reasons why, but I also needed a way to, I guess, show leadership, be able to, I guess, aspire to some of the goals in which I have. And I believe someone did say something about other ways in which you can potentially, I guess, show the type of leadership, I guess, material. And I've done some of those things. I've done Alternative Spring Break, like I said. I'm a co-director of Black Student Union. But I think one of the key important things that I have done, which I believe have built me as a person, as far as having leadership experience, is ROTC. And I do believe that even though there are other ways to, I guess, show leadership potential, and this is regardless of any type of political preference, because believe it or not, there are Democrats, there are liberals in ROTC as well. I can attest to that. But again, regardless of, I guess, political identification, there is an importance to being able to pay for college, be able to show leadership experience, and there's so much more to the potential of militarism. And I believe someone else mentioned about how this is the wrong way to go about it, and I just agree with that. I don't want to take any much more of your time, but again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and God bless you.
Appreciate your participation. Professor Bonine.
Thanks. I would feel remiss, this is a personal thing, but I want to say I perhaps am the only professor in the room here who went through ROTC, graduated from ROTC, served in the military for 2 years. Frankly, I didn't learn much of leadership in ROTC, but I also think that it's very important that we have a diverse officer corps and a corps of people who are, in fact, are not professionals. I went into ROTC because then I wouldn't have to play tennis. Honest to God, at Stanford University, part of general education was either do a sport or do ROTC. So as soon as it was over, I dropped out. Then, as the Vietnam War heated up, I went back in during law school at Yale University, and I have to say that my experience in the military, I believe, was helpful to the military, for I was able to expose corruption at a military post, which I'm not sure other people might have done had somebody like this been there. So I actually laud the students who go into ROTC. I'm very worried, as Frank is, about the militarization, and I'm particularly worried about the link with corrupt corporations. But I don't think that ending it here is exactly the right solution, and I just wanted to make that comment. So.
Thank you. Item 5 on our agenda, open discussion, I believe we can skip because we have dealt with that matter. Item 6 is our reports, and I'm going to ask your permission to modify the order of these reports. I'd like to take 6.1 first and then move 6.5 up because we have Jim O'Fallon here to do the report from the faculty athletics rep, and then do Professor Dreiling's, and then the two that I'll do very, very quickly. So I guess I'm making a motion to change the order of the agenda. All those in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, Senator Sayer, thank you.
I'm here to deliver the report from the NTTF committee, which I am chairing this year. This is part of the regular decennial review of the committees, their structures, their membership, their charge. And the committee last met on Monday. We've decided we need to reconsider the charge and the membership because some of our responsibilities have been changed as a result of the collective bargaining agreement. So we would like to postpone any action on revising the committee charge and membership till a later meeting.
Thank you, Senator Sayer. Item 6.5, report from the faculty athletics representative, Jim O'Fallon. Professor O'Fallon, would you like the microphone to be brought to you, or do you want to? What's your preference? All right, come on down. Do you want to use this one? Or do you want to use the podium?
I will try not to hold you too much longer. This appearance is something that was originally suggested to happen on an annual basis by that task force that you've probably heard about several times. For the last several years, I received no invitation from the President of the Senate, so I now welcome the opportunity that I have. But coming at the end of your meeting after a long term, I'm sure is probably not when you want to hear all the great details that I might provide. So I'm going to talk about the thing that's been the elephant in the room with regard to our athletics program for the last 3 years, very briefly, and that is the investigation that we just completed a few months ago into the behaviors, the activities of our football program with regard to recruiting. And I think what I want to say at the outset is at the end of that, it's very clear that there was no cheating. That is, that there was a finding of no intentional violation of any rule with the effort to achieve some kind of ill-gotten advantage. There were violations of rules that in any heavily regulated industry, I think you'd probably fairly characterize them
as technical violations, but nonetheless violations that were found to give us a certain amount of advantage, which we had to disgorge in the way of the penalties that have been imposed on us. Not only was there no cheating, but there was no cover-up. From the beginning of this process, which was a Yahoo article rather sensationally suggesting that we had bought players, the NCAA was in charge, the enforcement staff was in charge of the investigation. They allowed us to participate with them as long as we let them take the lead and do it in the way that they insisted on doing it. And so in any meaningful sense of a cover-up, when the people who are appropriately in charge have the information and are getting the full cooperation of the institution, there's no cover-up. There is the NCAA's tendency to insist on a perhaps inordinate level of confidentiality as they carry out investigations, and so we were bound for the entire period of this, last three presidents of the university, to maintain our confidence. The President Gottfredson assured us when he came in that he wanted consultation that we could do within the terms of the confidentiality requirements of the NCAA, and we did with both the executive of the Intercollegiate Athletics Committee and certain other senior members of the faculty who had experience with the program, maintain a degree of shared information about what was going on the understanding that it had to be held confidentially. We finally got the resolution. The core of what happened was that there is a basic rule of the NCAA's operation that so-called boosters, known technically as representatives of the athletics interest of the institution, have to be kept out of the recruiting process. There is also a specific rule that allows an institution to hire the services of a recruiting company that is basically in the business of providing information. And when you're trying to recruit across a very wide swath of the country, you need information. It's a critical thing. You all know it from the fact that we're now doing virtually every search that we do on campus with a search firm of some sort or another involved. The kind of information that we were getting from Mr. Will Lyles, who was the primary character here, was most interestingly information that saved our coaches time. Because he was able to say, no, that kid's not leaving Texas. It doesn't make any difference. There are 3 Texas schools that are interested in him. Don't waste your time on it. Or that young man has several children already, and it probably is not a good idea to add him to your cohort at the institution. A range of character information and likelihood of success in recruiting is the primary value that the recruiting service brings to the institution. And there's a pretty good trade-off in terms of the amount of time that our assistant coaches spend out on the road, running up frequent flyer miles and running up costs, and what we're able to avoid doing by getting a recruiting service. The problem is, and these services have been out there for a long time. Schools have developed ways of consulting with them, getting information. For the first time after this article came out, the NCAA decided that they had to get their hands on this process in some way that they had not previously done. And the thing that they came up with was a determination that even though there is an explicit rule permitting you to hire these services, you make them representatives of your athletics interest, and that puts serious constraints on what they can do, the kinds of information gathering they can do, the relations they can have with prospective student athletes. So essentially, we became, as a result of this finding, everything that Will Lyles had done to develop relationships with prospective student athletes in order to have something to sell, that is information to sell to potential recruiters, became our responsibility. But interestingly enough, also every other institution that hired his firm. So we've got, every time he acts, he is compromising however many institutions he has an employment relationship with. Well, that basically, because the language of the rule permits it, we were stuck with having to accept that. Okay, that's the rule now. Nobody knew that before, but we now know it. And several of the things that he was doing for us in terms of communicating with prospective student athletes, he couldn't do anymore, and we had to pay the price for it. That's the core of the violation that we were stuck with. We went through a process which is called summary disposition, in which we came to an understanding with the enforcement staff of what had happened, and we tried to submit it as a way of going without a hearing to ultimate resolution of the case. Interestingly enough, that's badly mischaracterized in the public press as a plea bargain arrangement. In the world of plea bargaining, you have both agreements as to what happened and an agreement as to the penalty that is going to be posed. The enforcement staff has no authority and no ability to deal at all with the question of what penalties are going to be imposed. So in the submission to the committee of our proposed summary disposition, there was one area of interpretive disagreement between the enforcement staff and the institution. That was the reason that the committee decided not to accept the summary disposition and rather require us to go to a hearing. So there was all sorts of speculation about how they were rejecting our proposed penalties and so on. All that speculation was dead wrong. The only thing that they were doing was saying we need to get the rule right. We don't like, as it turned out, we don't like what the enforcement staff is doing in terms of the interpretation of the rule. And they came down in that part of the case on the side of our interpretation of the rule. The ultimate penalties that were imposed on us were essentially the same penalties that we had proposed through the summary disposition process. They extended our proposed probationary period one additional year because we had had an infraction several years ago, so we were, under those circumstances, under NCAA rules, we were a repeat offender. But if you're paying attention to these things, if they got your attention at all, you'll have seen that the actual imposition of penalties was relatively minor. Very little bit of scholarship constriction and a little bit of restriction on the coaches recruiting things. And we can't use recruiting services during the period of things. Well, we had sort of figured that out anyway. So that's basically the great mystery of the investigation. Why it took 3 years, nobody knows. except that there have been some other things that have happened with the enforcement staff more recently in other cases that suggest that they've got some real problems. And we were just caught in some of the wash of that. We did have to educate 3 presidents along the way, and they embraced that education. Just we're really happy to have that opportunity. So that's that piece of it. Now, what I could spend a little bit of time talking about are some anticipated changes that are going to be affecting the way our student athletes experience the world under the rules of the NCAA. Mainly having to do with academic changes. The NCAA has been on a route of gradually increasing the academic requirements that they impose on student athletes for several years now, and we're about to get one more significant kick up in terms of the academic requirements that have to be met for people coming in as freshmen to be able to compete during their first year in school. They're not horribly onerous, but there is going to be one cohort of people that in this year's class would have been able to play next year, which will be next year not able to play. They'll be able to practice, but they will be excluded from competition for their first year. And it's a very small hook on a sliding scale that hooks up relatively low SAT scores and relatively low GPAs. So we could spend far more time than you want to going through what the initial eligibility requirements are, but there's a tweaking of it that, according to the Committee on Academic Performance, is going to have the consequence of increasing the likelihood of academic success at all of our institutions. And so that's where that's coming into place next year. I don't know whether you have particular questions about the athletics program that you'd rather talk about than go home and have dinner, but
I think we'll just thank you, by the way, Jim, for coming. We will be much better about our annual invitations from here on in. We probably just will take a minute for questions. I see Senator Harbaugh. Senators, may I have your permission to go to 5:10? Okay, we will adjourn then because there's a class coming in. Senator Harbaugh?
So I'll be brief. Back in 2004, the Athletics Task Force recommended that the faculty athletics representative be reviewed every 5 years. Jim, I think you've had this job for 25 years now, and my understanding is that you've never been reviewed in the way that task force proposal calls for. So I'm not sure if I should make a motion now or if I should wait to the end of the meeting, but I'm going to make a motion to call for a review of your performance as faculty athletics representative.
Well, I have to say that doesn't surprise me a bit. As I doubt seriously that any of the other people in this room are in control of their own evaluations or responsible for whether those evaluations happen or not. Do you go out and secure an evaluation of yourself on a regular basis?
Yeah, every 3 years I'm reviewed.
You do. You go out and arrange that.
Let's do this in an orderly fashion. There's a motion on the floor. Was that a motion, Senator?
Yeah, that's a motion, and it's a notice of motion, so I can give the details later.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Professor O'Fallon? Thank you. I appreciate it. Senator Dreiling, you have a report.
All right, I'll step up to the front. Okay. Got a couple minutes here to summarize progress on
the academic freedom discussion coming from the Senate work group established earlier in the fall. I'm going to move this so you can probably hear me just fine without it, though. But I'm delighted to report that we have now had our second meeting with President Gottfredson as well as Provost Coltrane and others in those meetings. In the first meeting, I already reported to you some progress as well as some reassurance that the matter of academic freedom was going to be something that the President was ready and willing to engage in with the Senate work group. So we came prepared to, following that first meeting, to do some further research. We've had our, I think our former Army, now law school professor, provide us a lot of substantive guidance on what he knows about freedom, what to do about this academic freedom issue. So we did a lot of groundwork with his guidance, as well as picked up the ball and compared the kind of best practices at other institutions, looking at our peer institutions, public universities in particular, in terms of their academic freedom and free speech principles and policies. We also worked with AAUP guidelines and looked at those, looked at legal context in which our academic freedom policy would necessarily be contextualized here in the western part of the United States, and we have, of course, the recent Demers decision that is relevant. We'll provide more information as we move forward with that in a report. But I want to just briefly go through what we came up with as a general outline for a proposal that we presented as very much a draft to the President on Monday, and we had a good, healthy discussion about that, and the policy now is in, I think, advisement in his court, and we will look forward to the feedback. We also understand that in our draft state there are there's some things we're also admittedly going to make some changes to. I want to read to you, though, briefly an important OAR, an Oregon Administrative Rule, that is the context for us thinking about academic freedom. Every institution and every institution of higher education, I think, has to appropriately develop their own policy on academic freedom, because not only are there traditions and practices that are informal and part of institutions and the kind of assumptions and principles they bring to speech protections around academic freedom, there are, of course, variations in governance. And the University of Oregon has a relatively unique configuration, and the configuration of shared governance here really necessitates a real careful thinking about academic freedom. I'll do that. And so what we did is we broke this up into four kind of general areas, thinking about academic freedom in terms of scholarship, teaching, and governance, and lastly, public service. And it is reinforced by this OAR principle, which I'll read to you, which says, as a matter of policy, the board, this is referring to, of course, the board that will no longer govern us. As a matter of policy, the board neither attempts to control, sway, nor limit the personal opinion or expression of that opinion of any person on the faculty or otherwise on the department's payroll. So that principle guided our understanding that the academic freedom provisions in our policy would necessarily encompass academic freedom protections for staff and OAs in specific settings, particularly in governance settings. And so I want to basically flag that issue is what's going to be under a lot of discussion, I suspect, and we will gladly report to you the progress we're making with the President and his team on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Drawley. I appreciate your efficiency. I have two brief matters to report to you. One is that we now have a committee that will be examining the fee-for-services issue, as was voted by the Senate a year or so ago. The members of that committee will be given a draft policy to work with that Professor Stahl has provided us. With respect to the legal services policy that you've heard me come to you about several times, We have a drafting committee comprised of Senator Sayer, Tom Leininger from the law school, and myself. We've set ourselves a deadline of January 6th of 2014 to come up with recommendations that will be given to the Senate having to do with the red line version of the policy that has been given to us by the General Counsel's office. And with that, we are, I believe, adjourned. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.